Beneath the most famous church on earth, there are bones. And the Vatican says they belong to St. Peter. For nearly 2,000 years, one of Christianity's most powerful claims has rested on a single belief, that the Apostle Peter was buried exactly where this basilica was built, directly beneath the high altar, the foundation of the entire Catholic Church, resting on a single grave. The story says Peter was crucified upside down under Emperor Nero around 67 CE. His followers supposedly buried him in a shallow grave on Vatican Hill. That grave became a shrine, and that shrine became the foundation for the largest church in Christendom. But for centuries, no one had actually tested the claim. No forensic analysis, no radiocarbon dating. The bones beneath the altar were taken entirely on faith. Then in 1939, workers started digging, and what they found changed everything. Pope Pius XII secretly authorized excavations directly beneath the basilica floor. The workers weren't just looking for Peter's grave. They discovered an entire Roman cemetery that no one had entered in 1600 years. Rows of ornate pagan mausoleums, perfectly preserved, untouched since the 4th century. A buried city beneath a church. Beneath the largest church in the Christian world lay a pagan city of the dead that no one alive had ever seen, sealed since the 4th century. But it was what they found at the very center of the necropolis that triggered a crisis. The excavators reached what archaeologists now call the Red Wall, a 2nd century structure marking a specific grave, directly beneath the high altar, exactly where tradition said Peter's grave would be. They found this wall. It had been built by early Christians to mark the burial spot. Inside a central tomb, beneath that wall, workers found bones. The Vatican assembled a team to examine them. The results were devastating. The central tomb contained bones from multiple individuals, both men and women. Some bones dated to entirely different centuries. Mixed in were animal bones: chicken, pig, ox. The first set of supposed relics was contaminated beyond use. That should have ended it. But one researcher refused to accept those were the right bones. Her name was Margherita Guarducci, an epigrapher, a specialist in ancient inscriptions. Guarducci spent years studying the graffiti scratched into the wall beside the central tomb, hundreds of ancient markings left by early pilgrims. And among them, she found something. Among hundreds of scratched prayers and names, she identified 3 Greek words: Petros ini, Peter is within. And she realized the central tomb wasn't the real burial at all. There was a second location that everyone had missed, a small marble-lined niche hidden in the graffiti wall itself. Inside that niche, wrapped in decaying fabric, were bones that had been moved there centuries ago. The bones were wrapped in purple cloth interwoven with gold thread, imperial burial fabric. In 1st century Rome, only individuals of the highest status were wrapped in purple and gold. This was not an ordinary burial. Someone powerful ensured these bones were preserved. The Vatican brought in forensic anthropologist Venerando Carenti to examine the bones. Carenti confirmed the bones belonged to a single individual, male, robust build, estimated age at death between 60 and 70 years. The wear patterns on the joints suggested a life of hard physical labor. The bones were consistent with a man who had lived a physically demanding life. The joints showed heavy wear. The vertebrae had compressed under decades of strain. And there was one detail that made everyone in the room stop. There was no skull. According to Catholic tradition, Peter's skull is held separately at the Archbasilica of St. John Lateran. The headless skeleton beneath St. Peter's Basilica matched a tradition that predated the excavation by over 1,000 years. Soil analysis confirmed the bones had originally been interred in the ground directly beneath the basilica. The mineral composition of the soil embedded in the bone surfaces matched the specific clay deposits found at that exact depth beneath the Vatican. The bones had been in the ground right here. Nitrogen-15 isotope analysis of the bone collagen revealed a diet extremely high in protein, consistent with someone who ate fish regularly throughout their adult life, not occasionally, habitually, a first-century fisherman from the Sea of Galilee. That is exactly what the Gospels describe Peter as. The Gospels identify Simon Peter as a fisherman from Bethsaida on the Sea of Galilee. If these bones belong to a man whose diet was dominated by fish protein, the isotope data aligned with the biblical account. In 1968, Pope Paul VI announced the bones had been identified convincingly. But here is where the story takes a turn. Because convincing is not the same as proven. No DNA analysis has ever been published on these specific bones, no genetic profile, no haplogroup assignment, and this is where the certainty of the identification reaches its limit. Without DNA, there is no way to confirm individual identity. No known genetic lineage to compare. What the forensic evidence actually proves is narrower than the Vatican's claim. These are the bones of one elderly man who ate fish throughout his life and was buried in this specific location with imperial honors. The identification depends entirely on circumstantial evidence, right location, right century, right age, right diet. Each piece alone proves nothing, but stacked together, the case becomes harder to dismiss. And that is exactly where the scholarly community splits. Some archaeologists call the evidence overwhelming in context. Others say context is not the same as proof. Others argue the entire identification was shaped by institutional pressure. The Vatican needed Peter to be there. Protestant scholars in particular have questioned whether the identification process was truly objective or whether the conclusion preceded the evidence. Garducci's reading of Petros Ni from the scratched graffiti remains the most contested element. Some epigraphers argue the scratches are too degraded to read with confidence. Others say Garducci saw what she wanted to see. But even her critics acknowledge the bones themselves are a separate question from the inscription. The excavation itself was unprecedented. No sitting pope had ever authorized digging directly under the high altar. Pius XII kept the excavation secret for a decade. He feared what they might find, or what they might not find. The political stakes were enormous. If no bones were found, it would undermine the basilica's entire theological foundation. And if the wrong bones were validated, the credibility of the entire excavation would collapse. It would be worse than finding nothing. That is exactly what happened the first time. The Vatican initially accepted the wrong bones. The central tomb remains included bones from at least 3 different people, plus animal bones. It took years for the Vatican to quietly withdraw those results. The embarrassment was significant. The first identification had been declared to the world and then rescinded. Garducci's discovery of the second set of bones in the graffiti wall niche came as a rescue. These bones had been carefully moved from the original grave into the niche at some point in antiquity, deliberately relocated during Constantine's construction of the original basilica in the 4th century. When Constantine built his basilica around 330 CE, workers may have relocated the bones into this marble space. Constantine reportedly leveled the entire necropolis and filled it with earth to create a flat foundation. Every tomb was buried under tons of rubble, except one. The engineering costs of preserving that one grave were enormous. He built around it. That alone suggests it mattered. Constantine, absorbing massive cost to preserve this specific burial, is among the strongest indirect evidence. No Roman emperor would have spent that much money and effort to build around a random grave. The engineering compromise alone cost years of construction time. In 2013, the bones were displayed publicly for the first time during a mass celebrated by Pope Francis. 9 bone fragments inside a bronze reliquary displayed in St. Peter's Square before thousands of worshippers. The most public exhibition of claimed apostolic remains in modern history. For the first time in church history, the supposed bones of its founder were shown publicly. So where does the evidence actually stand? Let's separate what science has confirmed from what faith requires. The science confirms the bones are from a single male individual who died between 60 and 70 years of age. The imperial purple and gold cloth confirms this individual was considered extraordinarily important. The isotope profile confirms a lifetime diet dominated by fish protein, and the soil analysis confirms original burial at that exact location beneath the basilica. What science cannot confirm is the identity. There is no DNA comparison, no inscription that definitively names the individual. The case rests entirely on probability, the convergence of multiple independent lines of evidence pointing in the same direction. And that convergence is stronger than most people outside of archaeology realize. No other burial beneath the basilica matched this combination: imperial cloth, fish diet, correct age, missing skull. No other candidate exists. If these are not Peter's bones, there are no other bones to test. This is the only set of remains that matches the profile. 2,000 years of tradition, a decade of secret excavation, forensic evidence that fits but cannot definitively prove. The Vatican never claimed absolute proof. Their word was convincing, perhaps all any ancient identification achieves. The bones are real. They are ancient. They match the profile. But science works on evidence, not belief. What makes this case different from most relic claims is the sheer weight of converging evidence. Not one test, not one inscription, but a stack of independent results that all point the same direction. In a marble niche inside an ancient wall, wrapped in imperial cloth, lie bones the world may never identify. And that ambiguity may be the most honest conclusion science can offer on a question this old. Certainty is not always available, but evidence still narrows the field. If you enjoy evidence-based investigations into sacred objects, subscribe. The next episode challenges another relic. Drop a comment. Do you think circumstantial evidence is enough to identify a 2,000-year-old burial? Or does the absence of DNA mean we are still just guessing? Where do you draw the line between evidence and faith? The bones lie where they have lain for nearly 2,000 years, tested, measured, debated, still unresolved. Beneath the altar, beneath the faith, beneath the city built over a 2,000-year-old grave, the bones remain. And perhaps that is enough. Or perhaps the next test, the one that hasn't been run yet, will finally change everything we think we know.